In brightest day, in blackest night, no one shall escape my fright. Here's your look at the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse DC vs. Vampires Gold Label Collection Green Lantern. Hal Jordan was summoned to the crashed wreckage of a spaceship belonging to Abin Sur, a member of the Green Lantern Corps. Upon his death, Abin entrusted his ring and his duties as Green Lantern to Hal Jordan. Wait a minute, let me have a look at that oath. Yeah, nowhere on here does it say you're allowed to drink somebody else's blood. Either way, before we get a closer look at the DC vs. Vampires Gold Label Edition Hal Jordan, let me send a big thank you to the folks first over at McFarlane Toys that were kind enough to provide the sample we could have a look at. Hal, in the state that he's in right now, still stands at 7 inches in height, or the figure's going to be about 18 centimeters tall. And while it seems to be he's currently growing mold, he happens to be also sharing the same mold as the earlier looked at John Stewart. One thing, though, is different between the two, and I know you're going to say it's the head sculpt. Yes, the head sculpt is different between the two figures, but also one thing, even though the bodies are exactly the same, you can probably see for yourself there's a slight greenish tint to Jordan's body that wasn't on Stewart's before. And speaking, of course, of his other brethren when it comes to bloodsuckers, here's what he also as well looks like with the DC vs. Vampires Batman. Though he did start in his plastic prison with constructs already attached onto his body, I've taken the liberty of, in fact, actually removing them, and they're sitting over there for right now. Before, of course, we look at those, I did also want to show you guys the trading card that the figure comes included with. I really like this trading card quite a lot. It definitely looks like, from the sight of it at least, that the fangs are actually energy constructs. Either that or the energy just happens to be wrapping itself around the fangs of Jordan. Either way, it's a really cool looking card. Flip though around at the back, the thing I was a little disappointed with was the fact that the paragraph read doesn't make any mention at all of DC vs. Vampires. In fact, it's basically just a generic read-up of Hal Jordan, which is fine and good, but if you're going to be giving us a vampire-related Hal Jordan, I like it, if anything, maybe if it didn't even have to have anything to do with really Hal Jordan, but maybe just a generic read-up for DC vs. Vampires, and then all the cards that would have come with the DC vs. Vampires figures could all have their own unique paragraphs. Anyways, we're going to move that card to the side. What, you want to see it one more time? Okay, there it is. All right, good. The next thing the figure is going to come included with as well is this black logo display stand. I always feel the need when I pick these up to kind of turn this around like a steering wheel to make sure that DC is always facing down below. If I was facing it, say, this way, then it would be backwards C and backwards D, and that would make no sense at all. Anyways, there is one singular peg that's going to plug into either one of the boots of Hal Jordan. Stay tuned for that. I'm sure we're probably going to be using that. And then we'll move that to the side. Now, let's have a look at the energy constructs that come included with the figure. First of all, you get yourself a collar piece. And this is really interesting. This has all been done in a fairly soft, translucent green plastic. I don't know why I always do that when it comes to translucent plastics. You can see probably that there's a peg right there. That peg just happens to plug. Anybody want to guess? Yeah, you're right. Right on the back of the figure's torso, right there. It so happens to also be the exact same place where Jordan's earlier figure, as well as Stewart's figure, had that same placement of hole. So if you wanted to, you could probably see where this is going. You could, in fact, take this and plug it onto the back of John Stewart's body if you wanted to use that effect instead. Looks pretty good. But then, unfortunately, though, by giving it to Stewart, then poor Hal Jordan has to then have it without. So I'd much rather have the figure displayed, I think, with it instead. Sorry, Stewart. We're going to go ahead and just detach this for right now. But we're going to go ahead and plug this onto the back of Jordan's body. Again, it's going to be that hole right there. You want to make sure that when you're getting this in place, because, of course, the spikier hair, you kind of want to make sure that you bring the collar around before, of course, you plug it in place. Just line up everything as best as we can get it. Sometimes it does get a little hung up, but plug it in place, and now you're good to go. The other thing that the figure comes as well included with, if I can just get him to stand for right now, well, not get him to fall in the process, is that the figure also comes included with this really cool looking claw effect. Now the claw, again, if you wanted to, you could use it with another Green Lantern figure. It just literally wraps around the figure's forearms. You could have the figure displayed like that. But again, we're not going to have Jordan without. So we're going to go ahead and plug this on. It literally is just a case you're going to clamp this around the forearm. Really, again, nice translucent plastic at play. To clip this around his forearm, I guess just before we do that, I did want to show you that Hal Jordan, I keep wanting to say now John Stewart, that Hal Jordan, in fact, does have a sculpted ring. The fingers are a little more longer side, but at least he does have at least a sculpted and painted well-in ring. Let's go ahead and we're just going to clip on the construct, which again just basically fits around his forearm and just clips in place like that. Now it does sit a little loose though. The kind of further up the forearm you go with it, the more stable it seems to be. Further down on the hand, then it gets a little loosey-goosey. You don't want loosey-goosey. Head sculpt-wise, I really like the way that Hal Jordan came across here. It definitely does resonate for me like a vampire. Something about this version of DC vampires is the fact that apparently when you turn, you also get long ears. I had no idea. But the fangs themselves are nicely done here. Very sharp it looks to the top and the bottom. He also seems to have a purple tongue and some really cool looking sculpting on his face. There's a decay, a darker coloring of his skin tone, all works really well to convey the idea of Jordan completely turning to not say the dark side, but the dark side of vampires. Now, of course, one thing I also really like about this is the fact he does have sort of an energy construct hair. I'm not really sure how that really works or why it even has to work in the first place. I mean, yeah, this maybe serves a purpose. I guess he's just so embalmed with flames and the effect of the actual ring that maybe as well it just ignites his hair. That's my only guess, at least. But I will say it looks really interesting. In a way, it sort of looks like it's actually glowing, even though there's nothing really on the figure that turns on and off a light switch. It's probably just the fact that I've got myself the studio lights shining down on this guy right now, that in a way it ends up making it kind of looking like it's glowing a bit. Boy, that is a really cool looking head sculpt. Body-wise, though, it's exactly the same as the earlier looked at Hal Jordan, and in fact, it is exactly the same as the already mentioned Jon Stewart. The costumes, though, again, like if you were to look at the two, Jon Stewart's is very visibly darker and black, where like Hal Jordan seems to have almost more of a greenish tint. One thing that's also different as well is that Jordan's suit also has the green carried down to his waist, where when it comes to Stewart's only basically runs around the sections of his shoulders. The symbols are exactly the same. The arms appear to be also exactly the same, except for the hands being slightly different from one to the other. Boots, again, shared between the two. Although the colors seem more muted here, it seems, on Stewart's, where actually Hal Jordan's has a kind of more vibrant green happening. And, of course, there's the mentioned already, the peg holes on the undersides of his feet. So, of course, if you did want to use yourself the display stand, you can plug it into either one of those feet. Let's look at the figure's articulation now. The first thing we'll look at is the head sculpt. So, of course, that's going to be on a ball joint. It rotates all the way around and still manages to clear things, especially considering you got the collar piece in place. There it gets to about right here where you realize you may want to just kind of help it a bit by just kind of bringing this out of the way. But the head does look down that far. The head looks also up this far, and you can also rock it back and forth as well. Now, the upper torso is going to be on a ball joint. It rotates all the way around. One thing you probably already have noticed if you have collected any of these DC Multiverse Green Lantern figures is the fact they have kind of more of a softer tummy, softer mid-abdomen area. I don't really personally like it myself. I kind of wish that this was just kind of harder plastic. One thing that they basically do is they just take like an overlay rubber piece and they drape it over top of the existing waist. I would have just rather had instead, I think this just all molded as one piece. I know I've said that with the other reviews that I've done in Jon Stewart and Hal Jordan. Just kind of molded this as one thing and then just sort of had the upper torso ball joint over top of that. I don't think it really necessarily need to have this piece right here, but it kind of gives you some additional articulation there also as well. Now, the arms do go forward. They also go back. You can hinge them out easily at 90 degrees. Rotating them all the way around is basically where you're going to start to clip the collar, and then you don't want to pop the collar in the process. I've known many people that have popped collars, and they're not popular people. Do you like people with popped collars? Let me know down below in the comment section. The biceps do rotate back and forth. There is a double hinge on the elbow, and the hands do rotate all the way around. As for the legs for Hal Jordan, they do split out this far. You can see that there's ratcheted joints once again inside the thighs. You can take those legs, yes, and move them forward, move them back, a swivel at the top of the thigh. It's actually more there just by the way they've assembled it. I don't think it actually is deliberately marked down on their sheet as this is an articulation point, but it always seems to be something I point out in these reviews. Figure has a double hinge on the knee. He has no articulation here for the boot. It's just one continued piece from the calf, but he has an ankle pivot back and forth this way. It has an ankle rocker back and forth this way, and the figure also has much appreciated toe articulation. Like the look, I must say, of Hal Jordan. Again, while this is basically just a mold, we've already gotten, what now, 4 times? Has it been 4 times? We've gotten ourselves, I think, 3 versions, if memory serves me correctly, of Jon Stewart. One that I'm also as well including the glow-in-the-dark version of Jon Stewart in the mix as well. And then we also got ourselves another version of Hal Jordan. Is it just me also as well that we don't really have gotten a lot of Hal Jordans? Consider this, the fact that we had gotten a Hal Jordan from before, but he was packed along with another figure. And now we have this release. We don't really have any other Hal Jordans, and I really hope that that's something that does change. Hal Jordan, for me, has always been the more interesting interesting Green Lantern member. And when I always think of like Green Lanterns, the first one I always think of is Hal Jordan, probably just because the time frame in which I grew up was reading those comics. It was always Hal Jordan for me. I would definitely like to see, as a side note, more Hal Jordan releases from McFarlane Toys. But I'm digging the look of this one. It's got some really interesting, very sinister vibes going for it. The head sculpt's really good on it. I still have to question why he has energy affected hair. I mean, if he's turning into a vampire, I guess, again, like just the energy from his ring is just seeping out everywhere, including his hair as well. But it's an interesting element included with the figure. And all in all, just a really good release from McFarlane Toys. Even though I would have preferred a healthier Hal, at least we do get ourselves another Hal Jordan figure, courtesy of McFarlane's team. This one, of course, now being inflicted by the virus of the vampires, and it really does translate for a very creepy-looking Hal Jordan. The effects of adding those energy parts that go on the back of the figure's torso, not to mention the one that clips around his forearms, does add a little bit more to that. Because I think one thing it kind of ties all things together with is his hair. If you have, say, the energy effects being then used for another figure, like, say, for example, you want to take the collar piece and add it for, say, Jon Stewart, I think one thing it does do is it sort of, again, ties everything together with the fact he has that translucent green plastic used also for his hair. Not really, again, sure how that translates. Like, if you turn into a vampire, does that mean if I turn into a vampire? I guess no. I'd have to turn into a vampire. I'd also have to have myself a green power ring. I mean, that's a lot of things that I don't have right now. So I can't really make the claim whether I would have fiery hair either. But I also really like the fact that they've given him a really interesting looking head sculpt. In fact, actually, all of the DC versus vampire figures that we've been looking at, whether it be the Superman, the Joker, two figures I actually didn't end up bringing in for this review, and they already looked at Batman, they've been doing a really great job when it comes to really reusing a mold that was already produced before, but finding an interesting way to use it. And definitely Hal Jordan is an interesting way to use the existing mold. Still, though, I would love to see an eventual release of another Hal Jordan, maybe packed on his own. Because anyone that hadn't got the chance to get that Hal Jordan 2-pack, that's the only time we've certainly gotten Hal so far. And at some point, I'd like to see Hal Jordan get a singular release. Who's with me? Who else would like to see Hal Jordan get a single card release? Show of hands. Oh, actually, there's quite a lot of hands with a show of hands. But once again, a big thank you to the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide this sample of the new Gold Label Edition DC versus Vampires Hal Jordan that we had the chance to have a look in this review. If you guys enjoyed this video, want to hit with a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and you'd like to certainly stick around for more DC Multiverse reviews, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, and you're also as well turning on the bell notification. Of course, if you wanted to check out some more of my DC Multiverse reviews, popping up also at the very end of this video will be a playlist. Feel free to give that a gander if you have a little bit of time on your hands. I know, nobody says gander. You know who says gander? Old people say gander. I guess that makes me quite old. Either way, though, guys, lots more videos coming your way. So as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.